It's funny, we were talking about this, between the two of us, right? We are kind of like serious people, or like on the more serious side. I say that because when I was growing up, like my whole life, people would tell me, "Oh man, you're so serious. Like, why don't you smile more? Why don't you laugh more?" And and I really think that it was because I hadn't really like figured out who I was. I hadn't really like come into my own. And I truly believe that that's something that you do over time, as you gain experiences. I've talked about before, like, you grow your opinions in tech or in something as you learn. So your opinions get bigger and bigger, and then hopefully you soften on them. And it's kind of for me, it's a similar thing with like how serious I am. Like today, I actually make jokes. I know it doesn't come across that way that much, but I actually do. I like to laugh. I like to, tell jokes. My comedy though is kind of like a dry comedy. Sometimes people don't get it. They're like, "Is he serious or is he like
Yeah.
joking right now?" And so I've kind of hit offensive people, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm just joking." So, but I was serious for like a long time growing up, and I think,
Mhm.
like I said, truly because we don't really know who we are. Even when we're going through like middle school and high school, a lot of people are just faking it. They're just, hey, they're trying to be popular, right? They're trying to have a lot of friends, and but when you go home, they're like a different person, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times we're just putting on this facade because we don't know who we are, and I'm seeing that a lot with my 13-year-old.
Mhm.
Like he's starting to figure out who he is and what he likes. And I didn't really like get over that until I went to basic training, right? So
Yeah.
we were both in the military. I went to basic training to AIT. So in basic training, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Had never
Same.
been to Georgia before. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hot, right? It's awesome.
Yeah.
Most infantry trains in Georgia, and so again, there's this, like, you can probably speak to it better than I can, but there's like this bubble, right? There's this radius that people will say that most people don't go outside of that radius like their whole life.
Mhm.
And then
Right.
and then even if they leave, a lot of times they'll return to that radius, right? And that's their thing. So they might only commute within 20 to 30 minutes of where they grew up or where they were born or the house they lived in. There's kind of like that statistical thing.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, I was like, I took some. I had a teacher who was a retired colonel, and he taught ACDC. I talked about this before. He taught
Mhm.
ACDC electronics, and he taught A plus and Network plus certification. And then during the summers, they invited me and this other guy to go, and we went around the school district and we upgraded computers and we swapped hardware, network cards, hard
Mhm.
drives, all that stuff. So that was back in 1998, 99. I really learned about tech. It just took me a long time to get back to it because, being who I am, I get bored, right? And I have to try the
Yeah.
next thing. So I did that for a little bit. And I don't know if it was him or someone else or just me saying, I want something different. Because you've seen that with me. I'm constantly like, I want and need something different.
Yeah.
So here I am in high school, not really thinking I'm going to go to college, not really sure what I'm going to do. A lot of people are like, oh, they're, preparing to go to college. And I'm like, well, you know what? I want something completely different. I want to get out of here. So, I talked to, recruiters
Yeah.
will come around high school, and I talked to a recruiter and I said, where can I go? I had a high enough, was it ASVAB score to basically do any MOS in
Mhm.
the military. I could have went Air Force, I could have went whatever. But being a young kid with not a lot of direction, I was like, sure, I'll do the army. And I like to cook. So I'll go be a cook. And they're like, you sure you can do whatever you want? I said, no, I like to cook. Yeah, again, I'm a kid. I don't really know. Like,
Right.
if I would have done this all over again, I would have said, oh, I want a job in communications. I want a
Right.
job in, engineering. I want you to train me. But I didn't really think like that. So the only thing I cared about was, where can I go? And so I said, can I get Germany in my contract? That's all I cared about. I got Germany and a signing bonus. Those are the two things I cared about. Because I wanted to go see other things, right? I wanted to go see the world. And um the military paid for me to do that, which is really cool. So go to basic training. Oh, here's the thing too, is I signed up a year in advance. I did that
Okay.
whole thing where you do the
Same.
early sign
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Me too. Me too.
yeah. So I enter my senior year. I already know as soon as I graduate, and then like the next week I leave, or like 2 weeks later I left. So I I go to basic training. And if anybody who hasn't gone to basic training doesn't know, it's similar to college in a way, in
Right.
that you have people from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, coming and joining uh this group, right? So you're putting like this group, this cohort, if you will, if we're using that term, and
Yeah.
then you're going to go through these shared experiences. You're going to share a lot of these experiences with that group, and so
That's the part where it differs from college. The experience that you're sharing is
yeah, the experience
pretty
is
different.
different. You're pushing yourselves to the extremes, and so coming back to what we were talking about earlier is like I grew up really like shy, like timid, like in my shell. Like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was very serious a lot. And when you go to basic training, it puts you out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
You're sleeping in a new bunk for the first couple of days. You're sleeping, because you're like in this once like a holding spot, and then you before you go, and then you're with all these people that you don't know, uh,
Yeah.
different dialects, different like just accents from different parts of the country. So we had people from the south, from the north. We had people from like Port-au-Prince, from the Caribbean, because there's some like U.S. islands, like the U.S. Virgin Islands or something like that,
Hmm.
and they can join. Like we had some folks from Puerto Rico, and so you're with all this group, and it really like helps you to open up and come out of your shell. You have to learn how to communicate with
Yeah.
different people. You have to learn how to get along with people that are not part of that little 20-mile radius, right? That you grew
Right.
up in, and
Right.
that's your bubble.
Yeah.
So I do that. Basic training is like I can't remember. It's like 8 weeks, right? Something 6 to 8 weeks, 9 weeks.
I think it's 9 weeks.
It's
I
9 weeks,
probably
right? It's been a
yeah.
while. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's been a while.
it's
This was
been
like 2000.
20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do basic training. You come out of basic training, you're like, I want to go to conquer the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've said that before on this podcast. Like when I talk about leadership, I think about, like, for me, when I think about leadership, I think about, do I want to go take the hill with this person?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if we're building a company, me and Randy, we're going to take this hill. And if we don't take the hill, we're going to die on the hill, right?
Yeah.
Or we're going to die taking the hill. We're not going to be stagnant. We're going to die taking the hill.
Right.
But the truth is that we're gonna do this together. And when I think about leadership, leadership isn't, hey, go take this hill. It's, follow me. We're gonna take this hill
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And so you come out of like you come out of basic training with this group of guys, right? That you're part of, or if you're co-ed now, right? You with this group of folks, and you're like, we can take this hill together. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the hill is. It doesn't matter how steep the hill is. We're gonna take it,
Yeah.
right? You have
Hmm.
this confidence, and so everything changes. So I tell this to folks too that are going through like high school, or middle school, and they're concerned, right? Like they have bullying, or I hate to use that term, but like teasing and stuff like that. You will never see these people again. You will never see 90%, 95% of these people that are in high school that might be, you know, you're trying to be cool in front of, or you're trying to make friends. You won't see most of them.
And if you do, after high school, it's intentional. You get to choose. You
You
get
get
to
to
choose
choose.
who you
Exactly.
see again. Because like there are people that you might keep in touch with, but like that's the catch, is you're keeping in touch with them because yeah, they disappear. I used to tell
Yeah.
my students that all the time, like, y'all, none of these people. I used to tell them, like, hey, y'all know how many people I talked to from middle school? Zero. Not
Yep.
a single soul that I went to middle school with do I talk to today. It doesn't matter.
It's exactly right. It doesn't matter. So, we go through middle school and high school, and instead of like focusing on learning, we focus on trying to be in the groups, right? And like to matter. And the same thing
Yeah.
happens with social media. I got off on total tangent, but the idea is, right, is that I came out of my shell.
Mhm.
Today I tell jokes. So then you go to AIT, right? AIT is another beast as well. It's very similar, but it's a little bit more relaxed. And I say a little bit more relaxed because you still have to, you're still like, there's certain rules you got to follow, things like that, right? But you start to develop relationships. Then here you go, I go to Germany, right? I got what I wanted. I got my contract, what I had put in my contract. I can guarantee you 95% of the people in my high school graduating class have never been outside the country,
Yeah.
right? And and you get these experiences, right? And they help to shape you, because experiences shape us. And if your experiences are limited, well, the way you act and the things you do are going to be limited by that, right? So um I go to Germany. i'm there for like I'm only there for like 3.5 years, because I was on a 4-year contract. um I knew probably about like a year and a half to 2 years in that I knew that this wasn't long term for me. um with 1 year left, we got deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And when I came back, I had like 2 months because they make you wait a little while because they want to make sure that you're not like suicidal or, you know,
Right.
suffering for like PTSD. So there's a little bit of a cool off period when you come back from a deployment before you can eat like ETS. And so I wanted to stay in Germany. like, like my plan, had we not deployed, my plan was to, because you can apply for like, I forget what it is, not necessarily just a visa, but you can apply for like another thing where you can actually stay and be like an expat in that country. And
Mm-hmm.
because I love Germany so much, it was really awesome. But you know, again, it wasn't just Germany because you can travel. Remember, they were part of the
Right.
EU, so you could travel to all these other countries just by train,
Yeah.
and it was really awesome. So anyway,
That's what Lewis is doing right now.
yeah, it's an experience, right? That if you have an opportunity to do it, right? Get a passport, fly to somewhere into the EU, and then travel and stay in these different places, and it's a really awesome feeling. But back to kind of where we kick this thing off, I wouldn't be who I am today had I not done those, right? Had I just stayed, had I just went and worked at McDonald's
Right.
or well, my first job was Little Caesars, had I not just stayed there and then I rose through the ranks and became like a regional manager or something, um, you know, the experiences wouldn't have been the same and I would be a completely different person. I
Right.
wouldn't I wouldn't come over here and I say this because we've talked about this before, like to be an entrepreneur, you have to know that you have to know in the back of your mind that the highest there's a high likelihood that you're going to fail. That's the truth.
Yeah.
But you have to have the attitude that I don't care. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter because if we can't take the hill, we're going to die somewhere along the route.
Yeah. That confidence is, I think, key. Like, and I have a similar story to yours, not super different. Um, I grew up in a little town. I don't know how much I've divulged on the podcast, but we didn't have a ton of money. My dad was very clear to us that if we were going to make it out of the town and or go to college, which is what he wanted for us to do, we had to figure it out on our own. And well, I didn't have the confidence to apply for scholarships. That's really what it came down to. So I knew I couldn't pay for college, and I didn't have the like. I didn't actually believe in myself enough to think like somebody will like pay me to go to school. And so what ended up happening is the army was like, hey, we'll pay for your school if you will join the army. And so that's exactly what occurred. As I went into the army, I was in, I think, a little bit, I was in for 5 years because that was the minimum. I was a chemist for the army. I think we've talked about that on the podcast before. And that was the minimum term you could do was 5 years because they like, it's your whole bachelor's degree, right?
Right, right.
And so you have to do 5 years. Um, and so I did that similar to you. I think I knew it wasn't for me about 3 years in. I enjoyed my first couple of years. I tried really hard to get deployed though, because I was stationed here in San Antonio, and I wanted to leave the country.
Right.
I wasn't able to. Even I cross trained as like a field medic, and they were still like, no, you're gonna stay here and be a chemist. I
Hey,
guess it's a little.
that's good to know. If I ever like we're ever working on a job and it becomes heated and we're taking this hill, like, hey Randy, come get me.
Yeah, so like I guess it's easier to find like people to be field medics than chemists, because they're like, no, you're staying as a chemist. And so yeah, similar to you, I was like, no, I can't do this. But I think the real important thing that you're talking about is like coming out of basic. I was a completely different person. I mean, one, I was in the best shape of my life. Like I was running, a 6 minute, sub 6 minute mile. Like I was in really good shape. And I had accomplished something in my life. Like for the first time, I felt like I had accomplished something in my life because I'd gone through this thing. I survived. I made it out the other end of something that I watched other people not make it out the other end of. And so like that was pretty game changing for me, because similar to you, I grew up my whole life. In fact, my dad sort of tells this story of like he doesn't use the word serious, he uses the word calculating. I grew up my entire life in school like being calculating, like measured risks, like very controlled, like very like lots of like of that, like very guarded. And so, but then coming out of basic, like I I was a completely different person. I had confidence. I knew that I could go to college and I could make it, and uh, I knew that I could do the job, and I knew that I could make friends and be that person. And so, definitely a huge shift for me. Even though I think what's interesting is that neither of us stayed in the military past our first term. We both ETS, and but I think those experiences are lifelong. Like you said, I'm a completely different person today. If it weren't for that, and I know the service isn't for everybody, but if it weren't for that, like I know how my life would play out because I can see it. I grew up in a dirt hole town with no jobs and lots of drugs. And that's really it. And so the thing that I also think about is like being intentional about creating the experiences that change you, who you are throughout your life to where you are the person you want to be. I think that's a little bit about like the entrepreneurship journey that we're on. It's like I want to continue to take risks that have rewards and um, create that sense of like independence and autonomy. And so I'm we have to be intentional about creating those experiences because like the older unfortunate thing about, for lots of people post high school, for people in the military, post military, is that your life is no longer a curated experience for you. You kind of have to go out and make it yourself, right? Like when I was in school, of course, everything is curated for you. You go to class, you go to these school events, like some of it's socially curated, some of it's not. But like, and then in the army, like it's even more curated. Like here's when you take a shower, here's when you shave, here's what's next, here's what's next, here's your duty shift, here's the thing, here's PT, this is forced exercise, like here's the outfit that you will wear. Your life is very curated. And then you leave, and like I had a really hard time transitioning out of the military specifically because of that, because there was no curation anymore. Um, and so I think like the part that I think about in my post-military life, which is now nearly 20 years, is like having to curate your own experiences to create that pattern of behaviors that will shape you and develop you the way that you want to go. That's true of picking your job so that you learn the things you want to learn. Like I go through that a lot, is like, what's the thing I want to learn out of this next job? But also picking the things, like kind of coming back to where this conversation started, that will change my personality the way that I want it to, right? Like if I want to be a person that tells really dry jokes, I need to have some kids, so it
Yeah,
makes sense.
some dad jokes.
Yeah, I love a dad. Well, you know that we both love dad jokes, and because I think they are pretty dry and like easy to miss, and like you get a little side chuckle, like I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And so, like you curate those experiences.
Well, dad jokes aren't really for other people. They're for us.
Yeah, they're
Um,
for the people telling them
yeah.
100% of
And,
the time.
and I can always guarantee you can't tell a dad joke the same unless you're a dad. Like it just doesn't work. I think people have tried and it doesn't come across right. We used to do this at like our old job. Say, hey, does anybody have a dad joke? And you'd have people, um, go on the internet, find dad jokes, and they deliver it. It's not the same because they're not a dad. They don't have that all that struggle that you've had to
Yeah.
deal with. And like I tell people, hey, you want to know what it's like having kids? Go stand in front of a wall. Start telling it stuff to do. And when it doesn't do it, that's what it's like to be a dad, right? That's what it's like to be a parent.
Oh man,
Um,
that was my morning this morning. It's like,
you know,
and the thing is that your kids are like in such a great mood while they're doing like the exact not thing you asked them to do. Like they're like talking about, like our oldest, he'll be like talking about space and fish and plants, but he is just not responding at all to, hey, we need to eat our food. We need to go brush teeth. Like we got to get to school. Like there's a schedule here.
yeah,
And so like it's really hard because like you're getting more and more frustrated and they're just happy as a clam.
right. And being flexible, I think that's one of the things I've learned about being a I think that's one of the things I've learned about being a parent is that you've got to be flexible. If we're super rigid, like if I were to try to treat my kids like they're in the military,
Right.
which I've seen when I was in, I
Mhm.
had I had a section sergeant that I had a section sergeant that periodically I would go to his like his house, and it was like a military style house or funded house. There's these, aside from barracks, right? There's actually family housing on base, and
Right.
so we'd go there because he needed to get something, and his kids would be there. He would lock them up at attention, and get at attention when you're talking to me, boy, and That's how he was, right? He basically treated them like they were in the military. And, you know, as a parent, like you're trying to find this balance of I need to provide them with structure. I need to, discipline them. I need, because if you don't provide discipline at all, then we basically end up with some of the people that we see, which again want to do whatever they want, and when they don't get to do it, then they, throw a fit, and then we end up with a lot of the problems we have today. But you're trying to find this balance, right? And so, yeah, being flexible. Again, going back to the wall, right? Sometimes that wall's not going to respond, and you just got to be okay with it. You got to walk away. You got to breathe, come back again, and try a different
Right.
approach. And then sometimes that works. But there was something that I was laughing about when you said it a while ago. When you come out of basic training, you're like in the best shape of your life,
Yeah.
and so was I. You talked about like a 6 minute mile. Oh man, I could run like, and there's this awesome feeling when you're like the group leader
Yeah.
and you get out there and you set the pace and you're like chugging along and just moving and booking it, and then they have to tell you, hey, slow down.
Mm.
Like when you get to that point, you're like, you just feel like, you know powerful in a way, right?
Right.
Like in your abilities, the confidence is like next level. You come out again, when you come out at that point, out of basic training, not like AIT and all the other stuff,
Right.
when you come out at that point, you're like, I can take on the world, but I don't yet know how the world works. Fast forward, right? Fast forward to 2021 when we kind of started putting this on. And I know you've done some stuff
Mhm.
before, right?
Right.
So I don't want to like minimize that. Like you built a ed tech company and you've done a lot of work. But mainly for me, fast forward to like 2020, 2021, I really got bit by the entrepreneur bug.
Mhm.
And it's hard to go back once that happens. So
Right.
that's probably another whole story. Once you get bit by that, you're just you've got to follow this route. And confidence is great, but if you don't have like the know-how, like if you don't understand how the world works, then all that confidence can only get you so far. Because the way that the world works, it's like a big game, right? It's like a big Pac-Man game.
Mm.
You got to understand the game to be able to play it successfully. And successfully simply doesn't necessarily always mean winning. It just means
Right.
not failing, right?
Right.
Simon Sinek always talks about knowing the game that you're playing, and really it's just being able to play it again tomorrow. It's not necessarily that you win, because there is no real winning, because the game
Yeah.
continues. So again, all this confidence, and then also like technical ability, right? So I've learned, again, we talked about this in the last podcast with Shay. You go to all these different startups and these enterprises and then feel like I can do this thing. Okay.
Mhm.
So confidence, technical ability, again, you have to learn how the world works, because once you learn how the world works and you understand the game that they're playing, then you can start to play it.